The rule of Uthman as the third Caliph was a time of turbulence, a time of division within the infant Muslim community. Generally speaking, the scholars divide his reign into two halves of 6 years each. He reigned for 12 years in total. During the first 6 years, his reign continued in a reasonable way. But then, in the last 6 years, he fell into a kind of nepotism in which he was appointing members of his own clan and members of his own family into positions of authority. To be in a position of authority, of course, gave you access to funds, public funds that were coming in that were under your control as the local authority or the local representative. That control gave a degree of independence of action when it came to money. Money leads to corruption. Corruption sets in during the last 6 years of the Caliphate of Uthman. That corruption had a focus in Syria, but also a focus in Egypt. And so people began to become disgruntled. They became unhappy about the way in which the rule of Uthman was going forward. And so they started to complain and to accuse him of acting in a corrupt and unfair manner. Those accusations built up so that delegations would come to see him, to ask him to correct some of his decisions, to ask him to put things right. And often these discussions with the Caliph would become quite heated. And again, we see Ali coming into the picture and his wisdom, his gentleness, his patience being used in order to promote justice and truthfulness in the community. So Ali would act as a kind of arbitrator between the different groups, between Caliph Uthman and those who were accusing him. Now, we know that Ali did not approve of the way in which Uthman was appointed as the Caliph of the community. We know that he did not approve the man for the office that he held. And yet Ali showed here a respect for the office that overrode the person who actually held it. And out of respect for the office of the head of the community, Ali was prepared to act as arbiter, as go-between between those who accused him and Uthman, who was accused. Eventually, the tensions built up in such a way that the delegations became quite heated, and we're told that a delegation came from Egypt and they had a discussion with Uthman and they thought that they had resolved it. And when they were on their way back to Egypt, they were overtaken by a courier who was taking a message from the Caliph back to Egypt. And they actually intercepted that courier, and they found that the message was quite different from what Uthman had said when he was meeting them face to face. It told the governor of Egypt that he was to take action against these men and not to honor the agreement that they thought that they had made with the Caliph. This angered them very much. And so they turned back, they went back to Medina, and they went to have a real row, a real argument with the Caliph Uthman. This argument built to such an extent that it ended up with one of that group assassinating Uthman. This assassination proved to be a turning point yet again in the early history of Islam, because here was the head of the community, the Caliph, who was being assassinated by not just some delegation from Egypt, but almost certainly by companions of the Prophet, that they were actually rebelling against the corruption, the nepotism that had come into his rule. Now then, the assassin fled the scene. He tried to save himself by departing and escaping. And the real question then hinged on the fact whether or not he could be captured, and then he could be brought to trial, and eventually he could be punished. The question of whether or not the assassin of Uthman could be captured hinged on, are enough efforts being made to actually seek him out, identify him, and bring him to justice? Because there was a group within the community at that time who thought that insufficient efforts were being made. Now, that group, of course, were the clan of Uthman. And Uthman, we know, belonged to the clan of the Umayyads. And so the Umayyads were uneasy, were angry with the way in which the assassin of Uthman was failed in being brought to justice. He should have been captured, more effort should have been made, and that became the crucial point of antagonism between the Umayyads and the rest of the Muslim community. Now, the Umayyads had their stronghold in Syria. Uthman had appointed one of his Umayyad fellow members of the clan, a man called Muawiyah, to be the governor of Syria. And he was particularly angry at the lack of effort that was made to apprehend the assassin. And so we see that a tension is building up within the Muslim community, not just about personalities, but also about clans and about geographical focus of power. Now, it's important to remind ourselves that one of the fundamental principles in which the Quran had been clear and the Prophet had implemented was that tribalism had no point, no place for any kind of power or importance within the Muslim community. Clans and tribes were a thing of the past. Everybody now should be an equal member of the community. And yet here again we see tribalism, clan politics rising to the fore. And we see a tension geographically coming between Medina, the city of the Prophet, and Damascus, the capital of Syria, which was the power base for Muawiyah and for his very powerful army. The most important army within Muslim hands at this time was made up of those who fought in the Syrian army under the direction of Muawiyah. They weren't all Syrians. Some of them were what we would call mercenaries. But nevertheless, Muawiyah was the great opposition power, and he was uneasy that insufficient action had been made to bring the assassin of Uthman to justice.